Hey guys, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. Welcome back. Tajudeen Ibrahim, the Director of Research and Strategy at Chapel Hill Denham, joins me right now virtually. Hello, Mr. Ibrahim. Welcome to the show.
Hello, good morning, Nancy. Thank you for having me on your show today.
Good morning. Um, let's quickly unpack what the IMF has actually said. I hope that you watched the interview earlier. Mr. Ibrahim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you
Okay,
hear me
good.
too?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. I hope you saw the few minutes interview I had with Dr. Ebeke here. What did you listen to that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so let me take your reaction, just a few seconds, to what he said. He's the IMF
So,
chief in Nigeria, so.
yes, I know. So I think, broadly speaking, what you said are consistent with what Nigeria actually currently needs, in this moment. And I've taken a quick look at the report, early this morning, and I realized that all those recommendations in there, if Nigeria can implement the bulk of them, it will be to our advantage. So broadly speaking, I agree with those recommendations.
Broadly speaking now, because I've also read the report, 98 pages. In fact, a colleague of mine just sent me a message, 98 pages, plenty, oh. So, but which part did you say we should recommend, we should take? Because let me go to page 5. And IMF said that, let me just take one, which is said, develop a, Nigeria implementation of past policy advice. The IMF was actually telling Nigerian authorities to develop a domestic revenue mobilization agenda, increase the VAT rate to at least 10% by last year, 2023, and to 15% by 2027. Now, they did say a comprehensive revenue agenda is under preparation. The VAT increase was postponed, given to high inflation. So IMF is telling us in Nigeria that our VAT should be increased to 10% and eventually 15%. Where we are right now, 7.5%, and we're still reeling from the hardship of it. I do not agree with this, really, because of the macroeconomic conditions right now.
So definitely, of course, we can consider, delaying the implementation of that recommendation because of the current, challenging macroeconomic environment. But the reality, actually, to my mind, is that, we are one of the countries with the lowest, VAT,
To
rate
GDP,
in the
yeah.
world. So, and if we are looking to develop the economy, we are looking to grow by investing in the domestic economy, then we need, the level of, in revenue that can, embolden the government to invest. And currently, as we speak, the VAT income is not supportive of, a large investment level. So if we have an accretion to the VAT rate, what that will do to the government immediately is that it brings in what I can call new money. When it brings in new money because of the increase, it further encourages or emboldens the government to invest in infrastructure and also emboldens the government to do any form of social transfers that can alleviate the challenges Nigerians are facing, particularly those at the low part of the income pyramid. But what may be a concern is the current environment. The current environment is not really encouraging for an increase in VAT, but it is something that Nigeria can consider in the next sort of 2 years, or let me say within the next 12 months, which looks more like by like December next year, which looks more like an 18-month period. By then, I believe our macroeconomic indicators should have improved. And then, pushing for the implementation of a VAT increase by then may be a welcome idea. But what is more important to my mind is governance. Nigerians have to see what such money is invested in when we have an increase in VAT rate that brings in what I call new money. The new money must be invested in infrastructure, and there must be transparency on the part of the government, that is when there will be a compelling case and justification for such an increase. Countries around the world where we have much higher VAT rates, most of them have something to show for the increase. So, but if we do not have anything to show for the increase, then I think there is no point considering raising the rate at all. But if we can show for it and the government can be transparent and implement the new money judiciously, I think it is worth it.
Tajudeen, why do you think that the perception of Nigerians towards the IMF is always that very negative? I remember, of course, years past where they prescribed certain prescriptions, and a lot of even economic analysts have said that it's from that time that our economy started tanking. I also asked him that question. I think that was part of my first question in terms of their prescriptions to Nigeria and even to other African countries. For example, in Ghana, Ghana is also really, IMF, I think, borrowed Ghana $3 billion. They've also entered Egypt and all of that. So why do you think we have negative sentiments towards IMF, and why many Nigerians are not agreeing to their prescriptions? Because we're a crude oil producing country. We should be getting dividends of being naturally endowed, unlike some other countries, like Qatar, UAE. Some will say, okay, it's a monarchy system and all of that, but not the same natural resource. Or some will
Yes,
say we are more populated than them, but not the same natural resource.
Yes, I get you, and I think I understand both sides. I understand, the side of the IMF because those recommendations, largely speaking, are what we should be doing as a country. If you look at Nigeria on a global scale, and you take a global look at economic indicators and where we should be as a country relative to the other developing and emerging market countries across the world. I also understand the side of Nigerians around not welcoming some of the ideas by the IMF. So to my mind, what is really missing and important to be addressed here is governance. If we have our government, for lack of better word, behaving the right way, and by saying behaving the right way, I mean our government is transparent, and we are efficient, and we work around ensuring an improvement in productivity in key sectors such as the oil and gas sector, for instance. Then we should be fine as a country, and some of these recommendations made by the IMF should not come with some form of disgust in our minds. But they will come, and we will not welcome them only if just because we believe that the fiscal authority is not doing the right thing. We lack transparency, for instance, in the oil and gas sector. We are unable to, for example, take advantage of the global development in crude oil prices. We are nowhere close to where we should be as a country in terms of crude oil production. Everybody in the country seems to understand that two key elements are responsible: theft of crude oil and vandalism of oil pipelines. These issues have been in place for ages, and it does not look like the government is addressing them properly. Because if they are being addressed properly in the past decade or more, by now we should not be talking about those two issues. And we should be able to take advantage of our natural resources. If that is the case, even some of the recommendations by IMF will not be needed, because the country will have been on a track to achieving the required level of growth and development, utilizing the natural resources it has judiciously. I think these are the areas that are of major concerns to Nigerians. And many Nigerians will find it difficult when you ask them to tighten their belts. They look at the government. So as the government tightens its own belt, these are the areas I believe Nigerian
Absolutely not.
government should address. Nigerian government needs to address these areas. If we do, the citizens will feel the positive impact. It is around governance, in my view.
Absolutely not. The government hasn't tightened its belt enough to tell us to tighten our own belts, and that's actually why we're seeing a lot of that because we have less people in government than the rest of the population. That brings me now to the question around Nigerianized policies. All well and good, the 98-page reports, IMF prescriptions, what we should do to come out of the quagmire we are in, and perhaps a longer-term outlook. Is there a way also that we can fashion, we can tailor our own policies with our culture, our social fabric, what we need in the country without necessarily even listening or just taking a few things here and there from the Bretton Woods institutions?
Well, I think it is hard, for us to not to listen to, external organizations, such as the IMF in this case, because sometimes it is good when people view you from outside and they tell you what is wrong with you. Sometimes you do not see, what is wrong with you when looking at and examining yourself alone. But when you have an external party looking at you from outside, they are, at like a better, position to look and suggest to you that these are the areas that you should, address. And I think for many African countries, in many cases, when you do not listen to the IMF on time, there comes a period when you find yourself in an economic mess, and the same IMF that you refuse to listen to, you then go back to borrow from them. An example in this case is the case of we have the case of Egypt, we have the case of Ghana, which is still currently what is happening in that country. So nevertheless, I reckon that of course there could be some domestication of some of these ideas, like we do it the way our country dictates in terms of our own pace and in terms of our taste and also in terms of how much we can accommodate some of these shocks,
Okay, okay,
because
okay.
if we don't consider
Tajudeen,
that, I think
if
it
you
might
can
be the
hear
best.
me, if you can hear me, sorry to butt in here, but I needed to
Mhm.
chip in this, that IMF, countries like Nigeria or even Ghana and co. Would refuse to do what they say and they will fall into trouble and then go back to them. There are
Yes,
examples of that. But the other
yes.
question is around if we are really intrinsic, if we are serious, you raise the issue of governance, if we do what is right, do we really even need to go to them in the first place? If we manage our resources right, if we are transparent, if we are accountable, if we do our own policies right, we may not necessarily even go to them or even what we need, okay, capacity development, knowledge, exchange and all of that. Not necessarily going to them cap in hand. I hope you understand what I'm saying. If you do things
I,
right, they can tell you,
I
okay,
get
from
you.
outside, okay, you guys do this. Because even some other Western countries, they don't really intrude as they do for other African countries. I've been to many IMF and World Bank meetings. The way they speak to Europeans and even America, their own sessions are so different.
Yes, so it will be different, because of the culture in those countries. Number one is that, those countries are a lot more transparent. Their governance, structure and transparency of the, government is, top notch. And, nowhere comparable to what we do in Nigeria here. And there is some level of, commendable communication from the fiscal authority, from the people in power to the public. And there is high level of accountability in all those countries over there. All those elements are missing, largely speaking, missing in Africa and in particular in Nigeria. So these are the areas that we should look into. Let us now assume that we're in a position where we're doing well and we're managing our resources very well, and we have high level of high quality governance in the country. I think two things will happen. Number one is that the IMF, of course, will be giving us positive feedbacks, and not only the IMF, other organizations like the World Bank, And even rating agencies, will upgrade our ratings accordingly. Number two is that Nigeria eventually at that point will be a positive case study for the IMF to be referencing to other African countries, as a form of, suggestions to them that, consider Nigeria in this case. This is what they did, and they succeeded. You too can consider doing that, as a country. So Nigeria at that point will be, a positive case study for the IMF and a good benchmark to follow and emulate by many African, countries and possibly other, frontier or emerging economies. Those are some of the positive elements that can come through for us as a country if we improve around governance, transparency, and accountability. I think we have the resources. It is just, working around all those three elements, that we really need to ensure we deliver on.
The debate around can we tax our economy to prosperity and growth has been on for a few days. Also, a few days ago, I posted it on X while I was just thinking in my own private corner, with all the things that's happening around the economy, if we can really tax this economy to prosperity. Around what the president is doing right now, I know that the president has suspended the cybersecurity levy, whether he told the CBN to suspend it or the NSA. However it is, like I mentioned last week, the NSA is not a revenue managing or even revenue generating agency, as it were. That money is not appropriated for in this budget and all of that. Those issues I dealt with last week. So how can how can this administration really get out of this quagmire? Because the posture of what this administration is doing right now, at least from the policies, is about taxing Nigerians. Now the IMF has said that you should stop electricity tariffs as well as what's the other petrol subsidy if inflation goes down. Inflation now at 33%. The IMF in this report says that if inflation moderates, subsidies should be stopped. So how do you really manage all of this from a president that is coming from a background of Lagos that taxed every Lagosian into IGR that it was, he's been known for in terms of generating money. But now, Nigeria is not Lagos.
Yes, I agree with you. Nigeria is not Lagos, but Lagos is in Nigeria, and Lagos
And don't
is
tell me that
being,
Lagos is the commercial nerve center.
yeah.
Lagos should set the pace.
So Lagos is really setting a good pace in that regard. And I believe, two key elements, were some of the success stories, for Lagos. Number one is the tax, revenue that we talked about. The second element is around a good utilization of the capital markets to address infrastructure, gaps in Lagos State. So we have very good examples, in that regard around some of the infrastructure, that we have seen in Lagos within the past, 10 to 20 years. And I think this is some of the areas that, the federal government, can also look at. Because what matters really as an economy is for you to, invest today for you to be able to consume in the future. But generally speaking, I think, most of the things we are seeing in Nigeria is a case where our government, appears to me like they prefer to consume today, instead of, saving for the future, to consume in the future. Then talking about, tax and taxing ourselves to prosperity, I say it again, not every Nigerian, can be taxed the way the government would love it. I think what has to happen is that there should be focus around, those wealthy Nigerians that can, take in, additional tax payments. Let us start from that standpoint first. Just like what we had in the electricity, sector, where about 15% of the total number of, consumers in that sector had to see an increase. in their tariffs. And that increase, based on the estimates that I have seen, is going to save Nigeria about 2.9 billion dollars in terms of what it saves the government by removing that subsidy on those band A customers. So it is things like that that I believe in the current environment, the government can consider, not to generalize it for all Nigerians, to pay additional, taxes. I think I have to commend the president by suspending the cybersecurity, fee or charge, which I think, this time is not something that Nigerian businesses really would like, because if they take it in, what will happen is that they will pass the cost eventually to all Nigerians. And passing the cost to all Nigerians is another way of further increasing inflation, because when I have additional increase in cost to my business, the one of the quickest way for me to mitigate the impact on my profit margins will be for me to transfer the impact to consumers, my customers. Are we ready for another round of increases in the cost of goods and services in this country? I think we are not. And that is where I think, I partly, commend the president on that regard. Any other form of taxes that are coming, I think should be selective and not generic to all Nigerians, given the current challenges we are facing, in my view.
In as much as I want to perhaps sympathize with the administration, and let me explain what I mean in terms of sympathy. Um, the last administration, mismanaged the economy, wasn't economic centric. Let me put it that way, in terms of policies and all of that. And you're seeing this administration trying to play catch up with coming out with reforms, whether they are pauses now to the reforms or realignment to the reforms, but at least they are coming out with those reforms. Where does it leave this administration in terms of economic stabilization? Because if electricity subsidy, okay, is there, slow it down, this one take it away, this one take it away. When will be the right time to really stabilize the economy? Do you understand what I'm saying? When will really be the right time? Because if, as Nigerians, we are suffering from these policies, I was in the market this weekend, and Mr. Ibrahim, I wasn't smiling at all. In fact, when people saw me in the market, a lot of people were like, Madam Nancy, you are here. Don't you know where the hardship, if you needed to see the complaints. In fact, one man told me like this. He said, Nancy, I am choking. He said, I am choking. A lot of people, they were telling me, what are you people doing? In fact, they had to drag the media into it. You people are not doing your job. You are not doing, please tell Mr. President we are dying. Even for me, the amount I spent in the market, I was asking myself, the last time I went to the market, I wanted to buy a certain thing, and it had doubled more than 250%. And I was like, what exactly is it? Even though you are rich, the rich also, they cry now. So how does President Tinubu address all of this? The need to put this economy on track, but the need to also be popular. He's also looking at 2037, no matter how you look at it. The need also that Nigerians are not facing a lot of hardship, because there's so much hardship. I bought fuel yesterday, 750 naira, in one of the filling stations here in Abuja, a liter. And
So,
IMF
so,
is
so
saying, take off the subsidy, so I will now be buying fuel 1.5. I won't come to work now.
So I think we should look at this thing from several perspectives. If we are looking at fuel subsidy, I believe that it is important for the government to be minded around that the fact that Nigerians are watching to see, okay, the subsidy you have reduced or removed, what you have saved, what are you utilizing it for? And I think this is reflected in the FAC allocation, that we have seen within the past sort of, 8 to 10 months, if not, 12 months. And this comes to the table around, questioning state governments. We always focus on the federal government, and we are always quick to condemn, what they do. But we need to also focus a lot more on the state government in this regard, because most of the states have been able to collect, a larger share, from FAC allocation. since the removal of subsidy, since the devaluation of the currency. So the big question is, have all the state governments, utilized this increase in funds judiciously in their respective states? What are the projects that they've embarked upon now that will be yielding benefits for Nigerians in future? What are the projects that they've embarked upon that will ensure that the cost of doing business, because everything we're talking about here is about cost. When we go to the market and we realize that food items are a lot expensive, what has happened is that the cost of producing and bringing them to the market has gone up. If the cost has gone up, what are the state governments doing respectively after collecting much more money from park allocation? What are they doing to address those gaps that they have in their respective states in terms of infrastructure? Bear in mind, investing in infrastructure is not something that is delivered in the short term. It is continuous. But we have to start from somewhere. If we start something today, within the next 2 to 3, 4 years, all those infrastructure will be ready and the public will feel the impact. Let us bear in mind that inflation, food inflation, for instance, is around 40%. The big question is, what is food inflation doing at 40%
40%.
when we grow food items in this country, when we are blessed with arable land, in this country? The idea is around, poor output, largely because of insecurity in major food growing areas. So if we do not address that challenge, it is unlikely that we will see much lower food prices in the market going forward. The second element is around the fact that we have a much weaker currency as we speak. So some of the farmers that even produce the few or the little that we are able to buy in the market, some of them are considering exporting to neighboring countries to get much stronger currency value compared to the naira. So you can hardly stop them because it is a free market. That is how it should be. So it is the government that should do their own part by ensuring that there is improvement in security. And I think it is highly unfair to continue to depend 100% on the federal government around the improvement of the security architecture of this country. I think each state has a role to play, which is a huge one, around ensuring the security of their states, the
How can,
security
how
of
can, how can they play it when there's an IGP in Abuja that controls his CPs, when there's an IGP that is on top of the police budget, when there's an IGP that is the president that appoints the IGP? I understand what you're saying, that they have a role to play. When it comes to security, they'll be like, I know Abuja, but when it comes to other things, they'll be like, oh, I'm the chief executive officer of this state. I hope you understand what
That
I'm asking.
exactly,
Yes.
that exactly is the point. So even if we have not been able to achieve what we are talking about in the country, which is around state policing, even at the central level, I think if there is sufficient collaboration between the central government and the state government, we should have an improvement, a commendable one indeed, around the security architecture in the country, particularly in food producing areas. It does not suffice to just give the farmers fertilizers. It does not suffice to just extend credits to them. When you do all those things and they still cannot go to their farm in peace and grow and plant in the required volume, how would they be able to supply to meet domestic need? So the easiest way this period, I think, is for the government to look outwards by importing food to ensure that we have enough food in the country. That is when we can begin to talk about stability in food prices or much lower food prices. And I think it is taking way too long, in my view, to address our insecurity challenges. So if we address insecurity, I don't see food inflation at 40%. I think the worst that we may probably possibly see, maybe like 15, 20% at the maximum. The question is this achievable in the next 12 months? I think it is yes, if all policies and actions are directed towards it accordingly. Community policing is very important. The central government or the federal government will not come from Abuja to your community in a state. It is the state government, the local government that should be held accountable. I think everybody just likes to blame the federal government around security. What is the local government doing around community policing, community security? So those are some of the areas that I believe the government can look at, going beyond the federal government, going down to state government, going down to local government in my view.
Okay, Mr. Ibrahim, final question. Let's talk about the naira. Just a few weeks ago, the naira was adjudged as the best performing currency in the world. Now it is the worst performing currency, from about 1,000 naira, which we all hailed, and we were praying that perhaps it should go lower. That's gain strength below 1,000 naira. As at Friday last week, I think it closed at 1,400 and something naira at the NAFEM. What does this say for the naira and perhaps the handling, the FX, the exchange rate handling of the Central Bank of Nigeria? Yemi Cardoso, of course, was at the World Bank IMF meetings just a few weeks ago. He was commended there. He mentioned it there, and did say that we're not defending the naira. But a lot of you and even other economic analysts said, let's see how much the CBN can hold this. What do you think is responsible for the yo-yoing now, the volatility that we've seen in recent days?
I think one thing we have to bear in mind is that the naira and the dollar issue is a function of supply and demand. We in February and in March we had a situation where supply improved significantly. But the supply that improved was largely because of elevated interest rates, particularly on money market instruments and, to some extent on, bonds. So we had the inflows of foreign investors into the country to take advantage of the high interest rate environment. Let me give you an example. As we speak, 10-year bond yield is around 20%, very close to that number. And in the US, 10-year bond is 4.5% thereabouts. So which means that any investor that wants to take advantage of our 20% yield will bring in money to invest in our bond market. So which means they'll be getting what looks like 15% extra versus what they will get in their country. So we had that issue. We also had the issue of OMO bills, which the central bank uses to control system liquidity. That also moved to well around 22, 23% yield. So foreign investors brought in foreign currency, and that helped to stabilize the currency in February. And it even gained in February and in March. That explains it. Nothing extraordinarily happened. There was no improvement in our inflows from exports. Those are the areas we should look at instead of focusing on foreign portfolio investments, which comes in hot and goes out also very hot.
Thank you very much, Tajudeen Ibrahim, for joining us this morning. Thank you, and always a pleasure speaking with you. Have a good day.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, I've been speaking with Tajudeen Ibrahim, who is the Director of Research and Strategy at Chapel Hill, Denham. We've been speaking about the economic report on Nigeria. Thank you all for watching. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. The news is up next. Thank you for watching. In case this is your first time watching us, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, drop your comments as well as like, and most of all, share our content.